Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of stablecoins,
Ooh,
specifically a protocol called Djed.
okay.
And, looking at the research papers and articles you sent over, it seems like you're really interested in like the nuts and bolts
Mm-hmm.
of how this thing actually works,
Yeah.
especially compared to other stablecoins out there.
Well, you've picked a fascinating one for sure.
Yeah.
Stablecoins are really trying to bridge this gap
Right.
we see between the crazy world of crypto prices
Yeah.
and the more, predictable world of traditional finance.
Exactly, because if you're trying to use crypto for everyday things like buying groceries or paying rent,
Right.
those wild price swings can be a real headache.
Yeah, exactly. So stablecoins aim to solve that problem
Okay.
by pegging their value to something more stable, like the US dollar.
Right.
But how they actually manage to stay stable,
Yeah.
that's where things get interesting.
And that's where Djed comes in. Instead of relying on a central authority to hold reserves, like some stablecoins do,
Yeah.
Djed uses algorithms and smart contracts to maintain its peg,
Right.
almost like it's programmed to stay balanced.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that Djed uses a two-token system.
Okay.
It has its own stablecoin that aims to hold that steady value,
Right.
but it also has a second token
Okay.
called a reserve coin,
Okay.
which acts like a buffer against volatility.
Okay.
Think of it as a shock absorber for the system.
Okay. I'm picturing like the stablecoin trying to stay steady
Yeah,
and the reserve coin like jumping in to help whenever things get rough.
exactly.
But how does that actually work?
It all comes down to what's called the reserve ratio.
Okay.
This is the ratio of the value held in reserve to the total amount of stablecoins out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar concept to traditional banking,
Right.
where banks only hold a fraction of their deposits as reserves.
Okay, I'm seeing the parallel. But wouldn't low reserves make the system vulnerable?
Yeah.
Especially if everyone tried to cash out their stablecoins at once?
Yeah.
That's what worries me about some of these other stablecoins, where
Mm.
you don't really know what's backing them.
That's a great point, and it's something that Djed addresses head on.
Okay.
They set these minimum and maximum reserve ratios called Warman and Rmax.
Right.
These thresholds are crucial
Okay.
for keeping the system stable and protecting both stablecoin and reserve coin holders.
So Wireman and RMAX are like guardrails,
Yeah.
making sure things don't go too far in either direction.
Exactly. Let's say the reserve ratio falls below Armin.
Okay.
What happens then is that Djed automatically prevents people from buying more stablecoins or selling their reserve coins.
So it stops a bank run.
This stops a panic selling situation,
Oh, okay.
kind of like a circuit breaker on the stock market.
So if you're holding Djed stablecoin, even during a market crash,
Right.
the protocol itself is designed to prevent a collapse,
Yeah.
because it limits selling when those reserves are running low.
Mm.
That sounds reassuring,
Mm-hmm.
at least compared to some of those other stablecoins that rely on a central authority to manage things.
And on the flip side, if things are going great and the reserve ratio gets too high,
Huh.
exceeding Rmax, Djed steps in again.
Okay.
This time, it prevents people from buying more reserve coins,
Right.
which protects the existing reserve coin holders from dilution.
Okay. So it's like this constant balancing act.
Yeah.
And Djed is constantly monitoring those ratios,
Right.
automatically stepping in whenever things get too far out of whack.
Yeah, got it. And to keep things running smoothly,
Yeah.
just like in traditional finance,
Right.
there are fees and spreads when you buy or sell stable coins and reserve coins.
Cool.
Think of it like the small fees you might pay when exchanging currencies at a bank.
You mentioned concerns about Tether's lack of transparency.
Right.
With Djed, you can actually see all the reserves on the blockchain,
Yes.
giving you the user more confidence.
Absolutely. Transparency is one of Djed's strongest points.
Yeah.
And to see it in action, we can look at Sigma USD, a stablecoin running on the Ergo blockchain that's actually powered by the Djed protocol.
Wait, so this isn't just a theory?
Nope.
Djed is actually out there being used right now.
It is.
That's impressive.
Sigma USD uses oracles to update exchange rates
Right.
and make sure it's always pegged to the US dollar.
Okay.
And what's even more impressive is that it successfully weathered the storm
Oh, wow.
during that big crypto crash back in May 2021.
So even when a lot of other cryptocurrencies were tumbling,
Yeah.
Sigma USD held strong.
It did.
That says a lot about the stability of the Djed protocol.
It does.
But tell me what actually happened during that crash. How did Sigma USD manage to hold its peg when everything else was going haywire?
Well, remember those reserve ratio guardrails we talked about, the Raman and Rmax?
Yeah.
They really came into play when the market crashed.
Right.
The value of the reserve coin, in this case ERG, it dropped to.
So the reserve side of our metaphorical seesaw got lighter,
Exactly.
putting the peg at risk.
Yeah, exactly, but Djed is designed for that. When the reserve ratio dipped below Mermin,
Right.
the protocol automatically kicked in. It stopped people from selling their reserve coins and further draining the reserves.
So it prevented like a complete meltdown?
This prevented a complete meltdown and kept the stablecoin pegged.
Wow. So the system basically protected itself.
Hmm.
That's some clever programming.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the other side, the Yormax? When does that come into play?
Remax is all about preventing too much value from piling up on the reserve side. If the reserve ratio goes above that level,
Okay.
Djed stops people from buying more reserve coins. It's like a pressure valve,
Right.
making sure things don't get too unbalanced in the other direction.
Right.
This protects the folks who already hold reserve coins from their holdings getting diluted.
So it's like a constant tug of war,
Yeah.
keeping things stable on both sides.
Yeah.
Speaking of keeping things stable, earlier we talked about SigmaUSD having a 1% fee.
Right.
And then there was an attempted attack.
Yeah.
What exactly happened there?
Right. Someone tried to exploit an early version of SigmaUSD.
Okay.
They were rapidly buying and selling large amounts of both the stablecoin and reserve coin,
Okay.
trying to game the system and drain the reserves.
So they were trying to break the seesaw, basically.
You could say that.
I guess with a 1% fee, they thought they could profit from the chaos.
Fortunately, the attack failed miserably,
Oh, wow.
and they ended up losing a chunk of money.
Really?
And after that, the developers increased the fee to 2%
Okay.
and made some tweaks
Okay.
to make it much harder to manipulate.
It sounds like they learned from that experience and made the system even more robust.
Right.
Which brings us to something I found really interesting in the research. The use of formal methods to verify Djed. It sounds incredibly thorough. What exactly are these formal methods? And why are they so important for something like a stablecoin?
Formal methods are like mathematical super tools
Okay.
that let developers prove their code does exactly what it's supposed to do, even in extreme situations.
Yeah.
It's a higher level of certainty than just regular testing.
So it's not just about trying to break things through trial and error.
Right.
It's about mathematically proving that they can't be broken in the first place.
Exactly.
That's pretty wild.
And they use two main types. Model checking,
Okay.
which is like simulating every possible scenario to see if anything goes wrong,
Okay.
and interactive theorem proving,
Right.
which is basically creating a mathematical proof that the system will work as designed.
Okay. So they've really gone above and beyond to make sure this thing is rock solid. Which brings us to something that I'm still wrapping my head around. Reserve inefficiency. You mentioned that even with all these safeguards, stablecoins that are fully backed by reserves like Djed currently can face this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Could you unpack that a bit more?
Of course, reserve inefficiency is a challenge for the whole stablecoin space. If all the stablecoins in circulation are fully backed by reserves, that means a lot of capital is just sitting there and not really doing anything productive.
Right. It's like having a safety net.
Yeah.
But the net itself is so big that it's weighing everything down.
Yeah.
But how does Djed plan to address this?
Well, they are looking at a couple of interesting solutions. One is fractional reserves.
Wait, didn't we just talk about how fractional reserves in traditional banking can lead to problems? Isn't that risky?
It can be, but the idea with Djed is to implement fractional reserves in a much more controlled and transparent way using smart contracts.
Okay.
Instead of having 100% backing.
Right.
Maybe they only need a fraction of that, which frees up the rest of the capital.
Okay, that makes sense. But how would they make sure the system stays stable with less backing?
That's where the algorithmic side of Djed comes in.
Okay.
The system would constantly monitor market conditions and automatically adjust the reserve ratio as needed. So even with fewer reserves, Djed can maintain its peg even during volatile market conditions.
It's starting to sound like this delicate dance between stability and efficiency,
Yeah.
always adapting to find the sweet spot. But what about the even more radical idea systems with no reserves at all? How could that possibly work?
It is a very ambitious goal.
Yeah, it sounds almost impossible.
But the potential benefits are huge.
Right.
Think about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
Okay.
Those are technically pegged to a fiat currency,
Right.
but don't have any actual reserves backing them, at least not in the traditional sense.
So you're saying a stable coin could potentially work the same way?
Yeah.
Stable without needing a pile of assets sitting in a vault somewhere. But how do you create that stability without reserves?
That's where the concept of debt for equity swaps comes into play.
Okay.
It's a way to manage the stablecoin's value by giving holders different options depending on market conditions.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me. Debt for equity swaps sound like something from Wall Street. not the world of decentralized stablecoins. How would that work in practice?
Imagine the demand for the stablecoin suddenly drops,
Sure.
putting pressure on its price.
Hmm.
In a traditional reserve-backed system, you would use reserves to buy back the stablecoins and prop up the price.
Right.
But with debt-for-equity swaps, you could offer people a different deal. Swap your stablecoins for tokens that represent a share of the protocol itself.
So instead of getting their money back in, say, US dollars,
Right.
they get a piece of the Djed pie.
Exactly. This would decrease the number of stablecoins out there supporting the price without needing reserves. And on the flip side, if the stablecoin's price starts going up too much,
Yeah.
the system could issue more stablecoins in exchange for those equity-like tokens.
So it's like a self-balancing ecosystem,
Yeah.
constantly adjusting to maintain its equilibrium. That's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
It is, and it's one of the areas where Djed is really pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Of course, there's still challenges to overcome before this could be implemented safely.
Right.
But it's a glimpse into a potential future of stablecoins that's pretty exciting.
It sounds like Djed is positioning itself to be very adaptable. Not just to different market conditions, but to entirely new ways of thinking about stability. It's not just about ergo either. We talked before about how Djed is designed to work across different blockchains. Can you expand on that a bit?
Absolutely. One of Djed's strengths is that it's designed to be blockchain agnostic.
Right.
This means it's not limited to a specific blockchain like Ergo.
Okay.
They have implementations in Solidity, which is used by Ethereum and many other blockchains,
Right.
as well as Plutus, which is used for Cardano. There's even an implementation in OpenStar, a framework for building private blockchains.
So Djed could be the universal stablecoin?
It could.
Bridging all these different blockchain ecosystems? That's a pretty bold vision.
It is. And this flexibility is a key advantage for Djed, allowing it to adapt to the rapidly evolving blockchain landscape.
Okay, I'm seeing the bigger picture here. But let's zoom back in on the specific implementations for a second.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there's a Djed implementation in Plutus, which is used for Cardano. What's interesting about that particular implementation?
The Plutus implementation takes advantage of some of the cool features that are unique to Cardano.
Oh.
For example, Cardano uses something called UTXO-based accounting,
Okay.
which is different from how Ethereum handles transactions.
UTXO-based accounting. Now you're just throwing out jargon. Can you explain that in plain English?
Sure, it's basically a different way of tracking transactions. Instead of having accounts with balances that get updated, it's more like tracking individual units of value as they move around.
So it's like following the trail of each coin rather than looking at account balances.
Exactly. And this model, along with Cardano's focus on security, makes the Plutus implementation of Djed potentially very robust.
It's amazing how many layers there are to this.
Yeah.
So we've got this blockchain agnostic protocol that can be tailored to the strengths of different blockchains.
Right.
But earlier you mentioned something about monetary policy scripts. What are those exactly, and how do they relate to Djed?
Think of a monetary policy script like a set of rules that are hard-coded into the blockchain governing how a specific asset on that blockchain works. It's almost like a mini constitution for that asset.
So for the Djed stablecoin on Cardano, this script would define all the crucial details like those reserve ratios, fees, and how the peg is maintained.
Exactly. It's all embedded right there in the script, which is then enforced by the Cardano blockchain. This means the rules of the game are completely transparent and can't be changed on a whim.
Wow. So the rules are baked right into the very foundation of the system. Talk about trust and immutability.
Yeah.
But, all this technical complexity makes me appreciate the role of those oracles even more. We touched on them earlier, but can you remind us why they are so important for stablecoins like Djed?
Oracles are like bridges between the blockchain and the real world.
Right.
They provide information such as asset prices that smart contracts need to function.
Yeah.
For a stablecoin pegged to the US dollar, you need an oracle to tell the system what the current exchange rate is.
Okay, so without accurate information from oracles, the stablecoin could easily drift away from its peg and become unstable. But what if the oracles themselves are unreliable or even compromised? That seems like a pretty big risk.
It's a valid concern, but that's why oracle security is such a big focus in the blockchain space. Sigma USD, for example, uses a decentralized oracle pool, which means it gets data from multiple independent sources. This makes manipulation much harder.
It's like having a panel of independent experts rather than relying on a single source of truth. That makes me feel a lot better.
Exactly. And there are even more advanced approaches being developed using things like hardware-based oracles or game theory to make oracles even more secure and trustworthy.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind of information,
It has.
but I'm starting to get a real sense of how sophisticated these systems are. It's not just about creating a stablecoin, it's about building a whole ecosystem that's secure, transparent, and adaptable.
You're absolutely right. And that's what makes Djed such a fascinating case study. It's a glimpse into the potential of decentralized finance to create a more robust and equitable financial system.
Okay, before we get too carried away with the future of finance, I have to ask, what about prototypes? We've talked about the theory, we've talked about Sigma USD, but what about the more experimental side of Djed?
Prototypes are a crucial part of innovation. It's where the developers can test out new ideas, experiment with different approaches, and see what works in a safe environment.
So prototypes are like the proving ground for new Djed features.
Exactly. They're the R&D department constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
All right, I'm intrigued. What kind of things are they working on in these prototypes? Give me some examples.
Well, as you can imagine, those fractional reserves and debt for equity swaps we discussed are being actively explored in prototypes right now. They can create simulated environments to see how these mechanisms would perform under different conditions.
So they're basically running simulations like stress tests to see if their ideas hold up in the real world. That's a pretty smart approach.
It is. They can test out different market scenarios, push the system to its limits, and gather data without any real-world consequences if something goes wrong.
It's like a flight simulator for stablecoins.
Mm.
But are these prototypes just about refining existing ideas? Or are they also exploring entirely new concepts?
They're doing both. For instance, there are prototypes exploring completely new approaches to stablecoin design.
Oh, wow.
One idea they are playing around with is using prediction markets to help stabilize the stablecoin.
Hold on, prediction markets. Like betting on what the price will be in the future. How would that work?
It's pretty clever, actually. Prediction markets are used to gauge overall market sentiment and try to predict future events.
Okay.
If the prediction market signals that the stablecoin's price is likely to drop, the Djed protocol could proactively take steps to stabilize it before it happens.
So it's like having an early warning system for potential price fluctuations. That's pretty cool.
It is, and it's just one example of the kinds of innovations they're exploring through prototypes.
I'm really impressed with the level of experimentation and innovation happening around Djed.
Mm.
It's not just a static protocol. It's constantly evolving and pushing the boundaries.
Right. And to do that, they need the right tools.
Okay.
One of the main tools they're using to build these prototypes is the Scala programming language.
Scala. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah.
Why is it particularly well suited for building these stablecoin prototypes?
Well, Scala is a very powerful language that's perfect for creating complex and scalable systems.
Okay.
It's also what's called a functional language,
Right.
which emphasizes immutability,
Go.
which is a fancy way of saying things can't easily be changed once they are said.
Okay.
This is crucial for building secure financial systems.
So it's a language that's built for precision and predictability, which is exactly what you need when you are dealing with money.
Exactly. And Scala has a thriving ecosystem of libraries and frameworks
Right.
that make building prototypes faster and more efficient.
Okay. They're also using other tools like simulation frameworks and model checkers to make sure those prototypes are robust and reliable. It sounds like they're leaving no stone unturned in their quest to build the ultimate stablecoin. All this talk about testing and verification makes me want to dig deeper into formal verification. We've talked about it in bits and pieces, but what's the big deal about using formal methods in Djed?
Formal verification is what really sets Djed apart from a lot of other stablecoin projects out there. It's a way to mathematically prove that the protocol will work as intended, even in the most extreme situations.
So it's like having a mathematical guarantee that the system won't fall apart, even if the crypto market goes haywire.
You got it. And that's super important when you're talking about something that people are using as money. They need to be confident that their stablecoins will hold their value no matter what happens in the market.
Right. Trust is everything in finance. But traditional testing can only cover so much. Formal verification seems like a much stronger guarantee.
Exactly. They use those two techniques we talked about earlier, model checking and interactive theorem proving. It's a lot like using mathematical logic to prove that the system is airtight.
It's like building a bridge that you know will stand up to any storm because you've mathematically proven its structural integrity.
That's a great way to think about it. Formal verification is still pretty rare in the blockchain space. So the fact that Djed is committed to this level of rigor is a really positive sign. It shows they are serious about security and reliability.
It's inspiring to see this level of care and attention to detail. But even with all these amazing features and safeguards, I have to ask, What are the limitations of Djed? We've painted a pretty rosy picture so far, but no system is perfect, right?
You're absolutely right. Every system, even one as well designed as Djed, has its limitations. And one of the big ones is something that affects all algorithmic stablecoins, black swan events.
Black swan events, those are those unexpected high-impact events that nobody sees coming, right? The kinds of things that can throw even the most well-prepared plans into chaos.
Exactly. Things like the 2008 financial crisis or the COVID-19 pandemic. These events were nearly impossible to predict, and they had massive consequences for the global economy.
Okay, I get what black swan events are, but how do they threaten a stablecoin like Djed?
Djed's algorithms are designed to maintain stability under a wide range of market conditions, but they still rely on certain assumptions about how the world works. For example, the system assumes there will always be a sufficient amount of the reserve coin to maintain the peg. But a black swan event could completely change those conditions.
So if something totally unforeseen happens, something that throws those assumptions out the window,
Yeah,
the system could become unstable, even with all the safeguards in place.
that's the risk. Black swan events can create market conditions so extreme that even the best algorithms might struggle to cope.
That's a sobering thought. It makes you realize that no matter how clever we are, we can't predict everything.
True, but that doesn't mean we should give up on algorithmic stablecoins. It means we need to be aware of the limitations and work to make them as robust as possible.
So how are the Djed developers dealing with this challenge? Are they just hoping for the best, or are they actually trying to mitigate the risks?
They're definitely not sitting on their hands. They're trying to build in as much flexibility as possible.
Okay.
For example, they're exploring ways to let the protocol adjust its own parameters,
Yeah.
like those reserve ratio thresholds,
Okay.
in response to extreme market shifts.
So it's like giving Djed the ability to learn and adapt on the fly, changing its own rules to survive a crisis.
Exactly. And they're also working on more advanced risk management tools and stress testing the system against a wider range of scenarios, including those black swan events.
Well, that's good to hear. It's reassuring to know that they are taking this seriously and trying to anticipate the unanticipatable.
They are. And this proactive approach is one of the things that makes Djed so promising. They are tackling these challenges head on.
Okay, so black swan events are one challenge. Are there any other limitations or concerns we should be aware of?
There is one other big one, the reliance on oracles.
All right, oracles. They are the link to the real world.
Yeah.
But as we talked about earlier, they can also be a point of weakness.
Yeah.
How are the Djed developers handling this?
They're using a multi-layered approach.
Okay.
As we've already discussed, Sigma USD, which is powered by Djed, uses a decentralized oracle pool.
Right.
It gets data from multiple independent sources, making it much harder for a single bad actor to manipulate things.
So it's like a jury of oracles, which is more reliable than relying on a single source of information.
Exactly. And there are even more advanced approaches being developed, like using hardware oracles or incorporating concepts from game theory to further enhance security.
It's fascinating how much thought and ingenuity is going into making these systems as trustworthy as possible.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why you're so enthusiastic about Djed.
It's really a remarkable project, and the team behind it is constantly pushing the boundaries. It's a great example of the power of open source development and the collaborative spirit of the blockchain community.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the nitty-gritty technical details to the potential impact of black swan events. But what about the future? What does the road ahead look like for Djed?
The Djed ecosystem is constantly evolving, so the future is full of exciting possibilities. There are a few key trends we can look out for.
Give us a sneak peek. What are some of the things you're most excited about?
Well, for one, the expansion of Djed to other blockchains is already happening.
Right.
We've talked about the implementations in Solidity for Ethereum and Plutus for Cardano,
Right.
and there will be more to come. This multi-chain approach is really important for Djed's future.
So Djed is becoming a true blockchain multi-tool,
It is.
a universal stablecoin that can work seamlessly across different ecosystems.
Exactly. And it also makes Djed more resilient.
Right.
If one blockchain has problems, Djed can keep going on the others.
It's like a diversified portfolio of blockchains, reducing risk and increasing stability.
I like it. What else is on the horizon? Well, the research into fractional reserves and those unbacked stablecoins we talked about earlier is really heating up.
Those are the really groundbreaking ideas, the ones that could potentially change the game entirely.
They are, and the Djed developers are right at the forefront of this research.
Yeah.
It's still early days, but they are actively experimenting with different models and mechanisms.
So they're not just sitting back and enjoying their success with Sigma USD. They are still pushing the boundaries and looking for new breakthroughs.
Exactly. And who knows what amazing innovations might come out of this research. We might see the emergence of stablecoins that are even more stable, efficient, and accessible than the ones we have today.
It's like watching the evolution of money unfold in real time.
It is.
And Djed is one of the key players in this evolution.
Absolutely.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But I think our listener probably has a much better understanding of Djed now
Right.
than they did before we started.
I hope so. Djed really is an impressive feat of engineering.
Is-
And a testament to what can be achieved in decentralized finance.
It's more than just code, though. There's a real philosophy behind it, a vision for a more stable and accessible financial future.
That's a great point. And that vision is constantly being refined and expanded, as we've seen with the research into new possibilities like fractional reserves and unbacked stablecoins.
It's almost like they're trying to create a system that can evolve and adapt to anything the future throws at it.
In a way, they are. They're building a stablecoin that's not just for today,
Right.
but for the decentralized world of tomorrow.
Well, I don't know about you, but this deep dive has left me feeling incredibly optimistic about that future.
Me too. It's exciting to see projects like Djed pushing the boundaries of what's possible and challenging the status quo.
To our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. Stablecoins are a rapidly evolving space,
They are.
and Djed is right at the forefront, pioneering new ideas and pushing the envelope.
Keep an eye on this one. It's going to be interesting to see what they come up with next.
And that's a wrap for today's deep dive into Djed. Thanks for joining us.